Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Today, we are returning to our Gloomhaven character builds with the Jaws of the Lion characters. Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion is a small standalone game, or expansion kind of, for the Gloomhaven base game. And it was always meant to be an introduction to the world of Gloomhaven. So to keep up that introduction type theme, I am going to be considering this a mini-series. I'm only going to be going to level 10 for the actual level breakdowns of these builds. And then in the final summary, I'll talk about what the full 20 levels could look like for each of the character builds, but I'll only really be covering up to the first 10 levels in the actual level by level section. I'm hoping that this will make the character build more digestible and also allow me to spend time on things like the background of Gloomhaven and why we're making the choices in D&D that we are. With all that said, let's get started looking at today's Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion character build. Today, we are making the Redguard in D&D. I will give a minor spoiler warning for the level 5 abilities, which we are trying to recreate. In Jaws of the Lion, these abilities do start off as locked, meaning that they are technically spoilers. However, because they're part of the characters, and because they're just minor additions to the character's playstyle, I am only giving a minor spoiler warning now, and then I'll give another little one when it pops up if you don't want any spoilers for what the character eventually gets. In terms of what the Redguard is in Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion, they are the tank of the 4 main characters. They have a big health pool, which in Gloomhaven there are 3 types of health pools, a small, a medium, and a big. The small just gains 1 hit point per level from their starting HP. The medium alternates back and forth between 1 and 2 per level. And finally large, which is our Redguard, just gains 2 hit points per level, giving them the most health possible in the game. The larger the health pool, the easier it is for a character to sit on the front line in a party and actually tank damage that enemies throw at them, for Gloomhaven at least. It's similar in D&D, though it's really helpful to have a tank in Gloomhaven, just given how the damage works in that game. In addition to their large health pool, the Redguard also has a lot of the shield effect, which in Gloomhaven that just acts as damage reduction essentially. And they also have access to the retaliate effect, which is just dealing damage back to the attackers. In addition to all this though, what really makes them a great battlefield tank character is the fact that they have access to a plethora of push and pull effects. Essentially, it just allows them to pull enemies towards them or push enemies away from them, depending on which ability is present on an attack or just a card action. That adds up to a lot of battlefield control for them, which for a tank is really awesome to have because that can allow us to pull enemies towards us, incentivizing them to hit us, and then hopefully we reduce the damage with shield and hit them back with retaliate. Finally, the last thing that the Redguard has are access to the fire and light elements. We've talked about elements in Gloomhaven in our actual Gloomhaven series, but to give an overview, elements are essentially kind of like magical powers. They take a turn or two to set up because you have to infuse the element with one ability in order to later consume it with a different ability. The ability that consumes the element, however, is usually going to get a very powerful bonus, like adding a condition or dealing just a lot of extra damage onto whatever it would normally do. So all in all, what we're going to want is good damage reduction, or at least other features that can kind of make us durable / tanky. We'll want some sort of range or control abilities that allow us to push or pull enemies around. And we're also going to want abilities that can mimic both the fire and light element. I'm okay with just getting the damage types that most accurately represent them, since the way those elements work in Gloomhaven are very different from the way magic effects would work in D&D. Before we start the actual level breakdown of the build though, let's look at their flavor text. Not every Valrath can be peaceful. There's a specific caste in the Valrath capital of Jahinda tasked with protecting the city. It is a prestigious position and one not easily lived up to. Outcast from Jahinda for unknown crimes, the Redguard found it too difficult to part from their identity as a protector, keeping the distinctive red armor as well as their chained sickle and shield. The only place to find work was as a mercenary in Gloomhaven, and maybe, just maybe, by standing on the front lines and keeping their allies from harm, the Redguard will find some way to redeem themselves, not in the eyes of the Jahinda culture, which has permanently turned its back, but at least within their own esteem. Starting at character creation with our lineage, we are a Valrath, which in Gloomhaven is typically a devil-type person race, so in D&D, that's going to translate really well to Tiefling. Just like our 3 Spears class and Sun class were from our actual Gloomhaven series, that means that we're going to take the Tiefling lineage, but we're also going to be choosing to be a Zariel Tiefling. This will change our innate Hellish Rebuke and Darkness spells out to actually be Searing Smite and Branding Smite at the same levels, 3 and 5. Also, we get to increase our strength by 1, which is exactly what we want. For our stats, we're keeping the +2 Charisma and the +1 Strength from being a Zariel Tiefling. We're going to use Point Buy as usual, and since this is a tutorial, I'm going to try and summarize how Point Buy works for those that don't know. Point Buy essentially lets you buy your stats. Each stat starts at 8, and in order to increase it, you spend points. You're given 27 points to spend, and each increase to a stat costs a certain amount of points. There are usually calculators that can be found online to do all of it for you, or if you happen to play Baldur's Gate 3, then you'd already kind of be familiar with Point Buy, as that is the system that the game uses. For the simplicity of our build, though, this is what our ability scores will look like. We're going to put 9 points into Strength, which gives us a score of 15, but then the +1 from being a Zariel Tiefling makes it 16. We'll leave Dexterity at 8 and not put any points into it. We're going to put 7 points into Constitution to give us a 14 total ability score in Constitution. Another 0 points in Intelligence just leaves that at another 8. 2 points into Wisdom will give us a total of 10 there. And finally, we put our last 9 points into Charisma with the +2 from, again, being a Tiefling, giving us a total of 17 to that ability score. With all that, we have spent our 27 points and are good to go. Finally, for our background, we're going to pick Soldier. The Redguard is a loyal Redguard / Royal Red Soldier, so we want a background that fits. We are technically an outcast, so you could play up that if you want to, but more or less, we're some sort of person dedicated to the martial discipline. Starting at level 1, with our actual breakdown of the character build, we're going to be a Paladin. Paladin is going to perfectly fit that thematic flavor, at least eventually, of a character who had, at least at one point, an oath to protect others. Technically, we kind of broke our oath as the Redguard, but we're not going to want to be an Oathbreaker Paladin necessarily. You'll see when we actually get to choose our oath at Paladin 3, but for now, just starting into Paladin is going to give us that first initial bit of flavor, and it's going to make us a bit more of a durable / tanky character, which is also what we want. At level 1, we're going to get Divine Sense and Lay on Hands, which is a bit of healing and a nice Paladin thematic ability, but they don't really do anything too helpful for Gloomhaven. And I will say that, like our flavor text said, and like the image of the Redguard has, our Redguard uses a very specific weapon. It is a sickle on a chain that they can use to get extra reach on their attacks. So what I'm going to suggest we do, unless you can get your DM to actually flavor you a chained sickle of some kind, we're just going to use a whip. We're going to flavor it to be a sickle, but a whip does the exact same amount of damage that a sickle does. They both do a d4. Plus, it actually does the same type of damage, which is slashing. Plus, we can use strength. Even though a whip has finesse, we can still use strength for the attack and damage rolls, which is what the sickle uses anyways. So there's really nothing lost here, and if your DM doesn't let you at least just flavor it as a chained sickle, that's very disappointing, because mechanically, it's not changing anything. The big benefit of this, though, is that we get reach with our chained sickle as well, which is really what we want for our Redguard. At level 2, we're going to continue up into Paladin, gaining some spell casting, the Divine Smite ability, and a fighting style. For our fighting style, we're going to want to pick from either defense, dueling, protection, or interception. Dueling is the only fighting style that will help us be more offensive, so if you want a bit more damage, take that. But for us, since we want to be a tanky character, defense would make us more durable by just increasing our AC, or since we're probably always using a shield in one hand and then our chain sickle in the other, protection or interception would make us tanky. It would use our reaction, which eventually our reaction will probably be spoken for, but for now it would actually allow us to better protect our allies by imposing disadvantage or just giving straight damage reduction which is again the Gloomhaven shield effect. I'm going to say for the sake of this, we're going to go with defense just for simplicity, but realistically you could go with any of those options. Since we just have access to the full Paladin spell list and you can prepare them each day, pick whatever you want. I will say that something like Heroism or Shield of Faith are good for becoming more tanky, but we might just want to use these to actually use our Divine Smite feature, which for us, I'm going to count as access to the light element because Divine Smite deals radiant damage and those are pretty similar already. At level 3, we're actually going to jump over to Sorcerer. Before I talk about that though, I will say that this is the level we unlock our first innate spell, which is Searing Smite. That, because it is an innate spell, isn't going to take from our spell slots, which is awesome, and it also deals fire damage, which is doubly awesome because that is what we want to do as the Redguard. They really like fire as an element, and they really like light, and right now we have at least a little access to both of them. Speaking of fire though, it's time to pick our Sorcerer subclass. And we're going to dive into Unearthed Arcana here to pick up the Phoenix Sorcery subclass. If you're not able to use Unearthed Arcana or you just don't want to, I suppose I would recommend either Draconic Soul or from an old D&D 5e supplement of Planeshift Kaladesh, you could pick the actual Pyromancer Sorcerer subclass. Phoenix Sorcerer is really what we want because we're not going high enough into Sorcerer to gain the bonuses that these other two subclasses give us to fire damage, but that's what we really want. Phoenix Sorcerer, however, gives us the ability Mantle of Flame right away at level 1. Mantle of Flame says that as a bonus action, we can magically wreathe ourselves in swirling fire. For 1 minute, we gain the following benefits. Any creature that either touches us or hits us with a melee attack from within 5 feet of us automatically takes fire damage equal to our charisma modifier. That is a really awesome source of retaliate damage, especially since our charisma modifier is one of our main stats for this build. If it wasn't obvious in the character creation, we're going to want a high charisma. Plus, with Mantle of Flame, whenever we roll fire damage on our turn, that roll just gains a flat bonus to the damage equal to our charisma modifier. Once we use the feature, we can't use it again until a long rest, but for at least one clutch combat, and for hopefully 1 full minute, that's going to add up to a lot of extra damage that is also fire damage, which is exactly what our Redguard wants. Beyond just the subclass features though, we actually do gain a few spells and cantrips that we really want as a sorcerer. Well, for spells, you can pick any that you want. There isn't anything really specific just yet that we need. But for cantrips, we want at least 3 of our 4 to be Lightning Lure, Green Flame Blade, and Booming Blade. In Gloomhaven, the Redguard is capable of igniting their chained sickle with either light or fire, and that is essentially what these cantrips will do for us. All in all, we want those cantrips and hopefully that sorcerer subclass, allowing us to have a lot of extra fire potential damage, and because we're not getting extra attack for a while, that'll allow our attacks to also have the bonus of those cantrips when we use them. At level 4, we're going to jump back to Paladin for Paladin 3, and here we're going to pick up the Oath of the Crown Paladin as our Paladin subclass. Again, I said that we didn't really want to go Oathbreaker because that in D&D is a little too necromantic and evil, whereas we're not evil, we're just someone who has been outcast from our caste that we were in. And that caste were Defenders of the Capital, or in this case, I like to think of it as Oath of the Crown Paladins. Either way, as an Oath of the Crown Paladin, we automatically get Command and Compelled Duel always prepared, so that's kind of nice. And we also gain their Channel Divinity, which can either be Champion Challenge or Turn the Tide. Turn the Tide is a bonus action AoE heal that is really clutch in dire situations when a lot of your party members are starting to drop, but we're still up. Champion Challenge, on the other hand, is a bonus action that is basically just Compelled Duel. None of those features are really Gloomhaven-esque, but they are better at making us tankier / supportive of our teammates, and we do want both of those anyways. At level 5, we are a Paladin 4 now, and that gives us our first ability score improvement / feat. It's also going to be the only ability score improvement / feat that I talk about here, so afterwards, the rest will be pretty much up to you to pick what you want, but I'll give some suggestions in the summary. We're taking this Tiefling-specific feat, Flames of Phlegethos. Flames of Phlegethos increases our intelligence or charisma by 1, which in this case is going to be charisma for us, so it's already a half feat, which is great. But then also it says that whenever we roll fire damage for a spell that we cast, we can re-roll a 1 on the fire damage dice, but we still have to use the new roll. A re-roll is still awesome though. And then finally, whenever we cast a spell that does deal fire damage, we can cause flames to wreathe us until the end of our next turn. They don't harm us or our possessions, but any creature that hits us with a melee attack while they're within 5 feet of us is going to take a d4 of fire damage. That's going to also stack with our Phoenix Sorcerer ability of Mantle of Flame, meaning that when we have Mantle of Flame up, if we were to cast something like Green Flame Blade on our turn, not only will the targets of Green Flame Blade take the Green Flame's fire damage, they're also going to take bonus fire damage equal to our Charisma modifier, which is now 4 at this point. And then if either of those creatures were to melee attack us while they're within 5 feet of us, they're also going to take a d4 plus 4 for Charisma modifier, meaning we basically just hit them with a dagger for free because there's no attack roll required with that damage. That's all really awesome. The only downside is that this won't affect creatures that are resistant to fire, but we want to deal fire damage anyways as the Redguard, so we're not too worried about that. At level 6, we are a Paladin 5, and here we just pick up extra attack. Now, being able to attack twice, we can choose whether we want to use a cantrip like Booming Blade, Green Flame Blade, or Lightning Lure, or if we just want to attack twice. At level 7, we're going to jump back to Sorcerer 2. Sorcerer 2 gives us Font of Magic. Font of Magic is just 2 sorcery points, which we'll eventually be able to spend on meta magic, but for now can just use to recreate some extra spell slots. At level 8, we are a Sorcerer 3, and here we gain meta magic. Meta magic is going to let us pick up the Transmute spell meta magic and the Extended spell meta magic. Transmute spell will allow us to change some elemental damage types to other elemental damage types, such as a cold-based spell to fire damage. Extended spell will let us cast a concentration or even non-concentration spell that has a reasonable duration and just double that duration to get even more effective use out of it, which is actually going to be something that we're going to want here when we pick up our first second level spell. And this is where I'm going to bring back the minor spoiler warning, because the spell we pick is related to what our Redguard would get at level 5 in Jaws of the Lion. So if you don't want any spoilers for this, feel free to skip this level. I'm not going to talk about what we get in the next couple levels, but I will talk about it again in the summary, so just be warned for that as well. If you're okay with spoilers, or you already know what the Redguard gets, or you just want to keep watching, then we can continue. I'll pause for a quick second, but other than that, final spoiler warning. So now that we know that there are spoilers here, and that's all out of the way, we're going to pick up the spell Dust Devil. Yes, Dust Devil of all things. And the reason for this is because the Redguard actually gets a Dust Devil-like card. They get a card that essentially summons a Dust Tornado, and they even get a little mini for it. That is what is spoiled, and they can just move that tornado around the battlefield and have it push enemies where they need them to go, which is exactly the Dust Devil spell. Dust Devil is a concentration spell that is just a 5-foot cube, but we can then move it around the battlefield, and if a creature fails a saving throw against this Dust Devil that it is within 5 feet of, it takes a d8 bludgeoning damage and is pushed 10 feet away. So that is going to be our go-to concentration spell from now on, unless there's a situation where we don't want to just keep pushing things around the battlefield. At level 9, we're going to become a bit of an absurd character by jumping over just for one level into Warlock. As a Warlock, we're going to pick the Pact of the Fiend, which is going to give us Dark One's Blessing as well as a couple extra spells to be able to pick from. I would recommend picking up the spell Armor of Agathes, or Armor of Agathis, depending on how you pronounce it. Armor of Agathes is a very powerful spell that gives temporary HP, and it also deals retaliate damage, more or less. It doesn't really stack too well with our Mantle of Flame ability, but if we were to transmute the cold damage into fire damage, it would at least trigger Flames of Phlegethos, meaning that if a creature then attacked us on their turn, they take the Armor of Agathes plus the d4 from Flames of Phlegethos. The other thing we get from Warlock is the Dark One's Blessing ability. What it says is that anytime we kill an enemy, we just gain temporary hit points equal to our Warlock level plus Charisma modifier. That's not ever going to be a lot of temporary hit points in our case. However, it is just going to be extra damage reduction whenever we kill an enemy, which is absolutely awesome for giving us even more durability and mimicking more shield effect from Gloomhaven. Finally, at level 10, we're back to Paladin 6 to pick up Aura of Protection. Aura of Protection is the really powerful Paladin ability that just says that ourselves, as well as anyone within 10 feet of us, gain a bonus to all saving throws equal to our charisma modifier. It's very awesome and very powerful, and doesn't necessarily make us really tanky, but certainly makes us a good protector of our allies, which is what the Redguard theme is all about. Now that we've done the levels 1 to 10, like I said, it's time to summarize the build. The rest of our level breakdown is actually pretty much just going to be continuing up Paladin, honestly. We already got all the casting we could ever want from our dips into Sorcerer and Warlock. I will say that the next few things we want out of Paladin are our Oath of the Crown 7th level aura ability, which is just called Divine Allegiance. Divine Allegiance says that whenever a creature within 5 feet of us takes damage, we can use our reaction to magically substitute our own health for the target creature, causing that creature not to take damage and we take it instead. It can't be reduced or prevented in any way, which kinda sucks. However, this actually makes us a legitimate tank. We don't have like a taunt feature to incentivize enemies to attack us instead of our allies, so we have to use our control effects to kind of do that, but this makes us an actual tank in terms of tanking damage for our allies, because as long as we're within 5 feet of them, we can just choose to take the damage for them instead. In terms of what we want to improve with our ability score improvement / feats, we really just want to improve our strength and our constitution. They aren't too great, and we want to try and, if not be able to cap them, at least get them each to 18, so we can actually feel like a frontline powerful character. Our attacks aren't going to be that great as long as we're still sitting at a 16 strength. For our Gloomhaven theme, though, we're very much the Redguard. Fighting style and Dark One's Blessing all make us very tanky, and can act like the Gloomhaven shield effect to some extent. Meanwhile, Mantle of Flame, Flames of Phlegethos, and even Armor of Agathes can add up to a lot of retaliation damage. Assuming we have all of them up and procced, we would be able to deal back a d4 plus our charisma modifier plus 5 times the spell level of Armor of Agathes when we get hit, and that's absolutely absurd. We also have the Lightning Lure cantrip as a pull effect if we want to use that. Our Chain Sickle / Whip is a reach weapon that can act as a bit of extra range. Plus we have our Dust Devil, which is just a consistent push ability that can even technically hit multiple creatures around the battlefield. And that all adds up to a lot of battlefield control, especially for a frontline martial character, which is awesome. Overall, we're a very strong D&D tank, and we're pretty close to the Gloomhaven Redguard, I would think, as well. I will quickly mention some regrets. We didn't get a whole lot of push effects besides Dust Devil, and our initiative sucks. In Gloomhaven, the Redguard actually goes very, very fast in terms of initiative. It's quite surprising, really. And they also have more push effects than what we got, and more pull effects too. We really only have Lightning Lure. So not getting more of these is admittedly unfortunate, but it's not the end of the world. Let me know what you thought of the build, or what you would change to get closer to the theme of the Jaws of the Lion character class. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.